They said she was glowing, a bride in love, a husband in awe. Guests toasted to forever, the couple danced beneath fairy lights, and everything felt perfect. But just hours later he'd be dead, stabbed to death on their wedding night, and she'd be found barefoot, blood-soaked, whispering, "He made me do it." Was it self-defense? Or the most chilling honeymoon murder Charleston has ever seen? Weddings are supposed to be new beginnings, promises of love, safety, and forever. But sometimes behind the first dance and carefully recited vows, a darker truth waits to be unleashed. This is the story of Daniel Ruiz and Rebecca Langley, and how a fairy tale wedding turned into a blood-soaked tragedy. The night air in Charleston had a warmth to it, the kind that wraps around you like a silk scarf, scented faintly with magnolia and salt from the nearby harbor. At Middleton Place, one of the South's most romantic and historic wedding venues, laughter floated across the candlelit lawn. Fairy lights blinked in the trees. Violinists played soft renditions of Ed Sheeran's Perfect and Frank Sinatra's The Way You Look Tonight. The wedding of Rebecca Langley and Daniel Ruiz wasn't just an event, it was an Instagram-worthy spectacle. White roses by the thousands, blush and gold decor, and over 150 elegantly dressed guests watching a woman who had cultivated the persona of a Southern belle influencer finally marry the man she said was her hero. Daniel Ruiz, 31, had been an EMT for nearly a decade. Calm under pressure. Gentle. Quiet. He'd met Rebecca the year prior during a photo shoot accident for a charity drive she hosted. She slipped down some stairs. Daniel treated her sprained ankle. They talked while she sat on the ambulance bumper, and within a month they were living together. To the outside world, the story was made for headlines. Injured model falls for her first responder. It was the kind of love story that got brand deals, social media buzz, and magazine spotlights. But behind the manicured smiles and filtered photos, very few knew the truth. Daniel had tried to call off the wedding twice. Friends noticed the tension, especially during the rehearsal dinner. According to bridesmaid Tara Watson, Rebecca had flown into a rage because Daniel didn't memorize the exact wording of their personal vows. She flipped out in the bridal suite, Tara later told investigators. She said, "If he messes this up tomorrow, he'll regret ever putting a ring on my finger." It was scary, like she wasn't just upset, she was threatening. But Daniel, ever the peacekeeper, smoothed it over. He always did. He told his best man Joel Hernandez that he wasn't perfect either. "He just wanted to keep the peace," Joel said. "But I could see it in his eyes. He looked trapped." Despite private doubts, Daniel walked down the aisle that humid Saturday afternoon. The guests never saw the subtle clench in his jaw or the slight tremble in his hands. They only saw a handsome man in a charcoal tuxedo, tears in his eyes as Rebecca glided toward him in a custom Vera Wang gown. The couple exchanged vows under a flower-covered arch by the reflecting pool. Rebecca promised loyalty, passion, and fire. 3 words she said defined her love. Daniel's vows were quieter, more traditional. Their kiss drew applause. Champagne flowed. The reception felt like a dream. At 11:57 p.m., security footage captured their last dance. Just the two of them long after most guests had left. The lights had dimmed. A few stragglers sat with half-empty glasses. And on the marble-floored terrace, Daniel held Rebecca close as Unchained Melody played softly in the background. But the footage also showed something else, a whispered argument. Rebecca appeared to pull away from Daniel mid-dance. He reached out to her. She shoved his hand aside. Then, moments later, smiled again as a photographer aimed their way. By 12:22 a.m., the newlyweds were on their way to the Francis Marion Hotel, a stately, upscale building in downtown Charleston. Room 807 had been specially prepared for them. Rose petals, champagne, chocolate-covered strawberries, and a note that read, "Here's to forever." No one could have known that less than 3 hours later, room 807 would be the scene of a gruesome murder. At 3:11 a.m., hotel security called 911. "Yes, we need police and an ambulance, now. Room 807. There's blood all over the bathroom. The man, he's not moving." The bride came downstairs barefoot. "She's shaking. Said she was attacked. Please hurry." When officers arrived, they found Rebecca sitting on the floor of the hotel bar, veil half torn, her white gown soaked with blood. She was cradling a champagne flute and muttering, "He made me do it, he made me. I didn't mean to." Paramedics rushed to room 807. Daniel Ruiz was already dead. His body lay slumped against the bathtub, neck and chest slashed, blood pooled across the tile like a gruesome tide. His wedding ring, still on his finger, was coated in crimson. A bloodied steak knife from the room service tray was found on the floor near his hand. The honeymoon suite had become a crime scene. The scent of roses now mixed with the metallic tang of death. Police immediately detained Rebecca. She was in a dissociative state, unresponsive, crying in bursts, whispering incoherently. A toxicology screen revealed a mix of alcohol, anti-anxiety medication, and sleeping pills in her system. Still, there were questions. Why did Rebecca leave the room without calling for help? Why were there no defensive wounds on her, but multiple on Daniel? And why did the hotel's hallway surveillance show her leaving alone, not seeking help, but walking as if nothing had happened? Detectives secured the room and began their investigation. And what they'd uncover would twist this tragic love story into something far darker than anyone could have imagined. Months before the blood-stained honeymoon suite, there were warning signs: doors slammed in the night, bruises dismissed as accidents, neighbors too afraid to ask questions. Daniel never spoke loudly, but Rebecca? Her rage could fill a room. And buried in one police report was a clue no one took seriously. Until it was too late. Daniel Ruiz was not the kind of man who liked conflict. He'd grown up the eldest of 3 boys in a working-class Hispanic family in Beaufort, South Carolina. His father was a Navy vet, his mother a seamstress. Daniel was the quiet protector, gentle, humble, and deeply loyal. Becoming an EMT wasn't just a job for him, it was a calling. He had a knack for staying calm in chaos. But Rebecca Langley was chaos. She was charismatic, wildly expressive, and unapologetically demanding. A former pageant queen turned lifestyle influencer, she had over 300,000 Instagram followers and a brand built on soft lighting, silk robes, and perfectly imperfect Southern living. Her captions spoke of gratitude and grace, but those who knew her personally described a very different woman. Rebecca needed to be adored, said her former roommate, Natalie Kane. If you didn't give her attention, she'd create drama until she got it. When she and Daniel moved into a downtown Charleston townhouse in early 2022, things seemed perfect, at least online. But behind closed doors, arguments erupted often, and sometimes violently. On March 11, 2022, at exactly 1:24 a.m., Daniel made a call to Charleston PD. The dispatcher recorded the entire exchange. Dispatcher, 911, what's your emergency? Daniel, breathing hard, no emergency. I want someone to come by, just to check in. Dispatcher, sir, has something happened? Daniel, no, not really. I just need to make sure everything's okay. She's calm now. Officers arrived at the townhouse within 10 minutes. Body cam footage from Officer Denise Monroe shows Daniel greeting them at the door, shirtless, with a fresh bruise forming under his eye and a small cut on his lip. Rebecca appeared moments later, wrapped in a silk robe, face flushed, her voice slurry from wine. Rebecca, on video, he's fine. He just gets emotional. We had a fight, but we're good. I'm sorry for wasting your time. Daniel told police he tripped while moving a lamp and refused to press any charges. Officers noted broken glass in the kitchen, a smashed phone on the floor, and overturned chairs. Still, without a cooperating victim, no arrest was made. He looked scared, Officer Monroe recalled in her report, like he wanted to tell us something, but couldn't. Daniel's best friend Joel later said Daniel confessed the truth the next morning. He said she hit him, threw a wine bottle at him and screamed that he wasn't man enough to handle her. But he begged me not to tell anyone. Said she'd calm down. Said she just needed help. But Rebecca never got help. And Daniel never called the police again. Following the wedding night homicide, investigators retrieved both Daniel and Rebecca's cell phones. What they found painted a picture far more disturbing than either family had known. In a string of unsent texts saved in Daniel's Notes app, he wrote, "I'm scared of her. She gets so angry. Then cries like nothing happened. She threatens to leave and then begs me to stay. I don't know who she really is anymore." Another message, dated April 2nd, read, "If she ever hurts me again, I'm telling someone. I have to." He never sent it. On Rebecca's phone, however, the messages were more erratic. Wild swings between love bombing and rage. One message to her friend Heather read, "Daniel is so boring. He doesn't challenge me. He's lucky I chose him. If he cheats on me, I'll and ruin him." Another message on May 9th read, "Sometimes I wish he'd hit me first. Then I'd have an excuse to hit back." Court documents would later confirm that Rebecca Langley had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, BPD, at age 24. Her therapist, Dr. Kimberly Reeves, confirmed under subpoena that Rebecca had exhibited extreme emotional dysregulation, black and white thinking, and fear of abandonment. But by January 2022, Rebecca had voluntarily stopped attending sessions. She said she didn't need therapy anymore, Dr. Reeves testified. She believed marriage would fix everything. It didn't. If anything, the looming wedding seemed to make things worse. Friends recalled multiple incidents of screaming matches at restaurants, tearful breakdowns in parking lots, and Rebecca showing up at Daniel's workplace in the middle of the night just to check his phone. Despite all this, Daniel pressed forward with the wedding. Those closest to him believe he was afraid to leave, afraid of how Rebecca would react, afraid of being the bad guy, and deep down, afraid that maybe she really did love him. He was trying to save her, said his sister Elena Ruiz. He thought if he loved her hard enough, she'd change. But he never saw that she was drowning him. On May 27th, just a week before the wedding, Rebecca showed up unannounced at Daniel's parents' house after a fight. According to his mother, Maria Ruiz, she said he was cold to her, that he was pulling away. She told me, if he ever leaves me, I'll lose my mind. He's everything. I thought she was just emotional. But when Daniel's father pulled him aside the next day and asked if he was sure about the marriage, Daniel responded with a bitter smile. It's too late now. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. But no one did anything. Not Daniel's friends. Not the police. Not even his family, because like many victims in abusive relationships, Daniel never saw himself as one. He believed things would get better. That the wedding would be a new chapter. That love could overpower instability. Instead, that belief cost him his life. When officers stepped into room 807, the honeymoon suite reeked of champagne, roses, and death. A groom's body, multiple stab wounds, and a crime scene that told a chilling story. Rebecca said he attacked her, but the forensics told a different truth. One that exposed her version of events as a carefully crafted lie. Room 807 of the Francis Marion Hotel was still glowing from candlelight. A just-married banner hung lopsided above the king-size bed. Half-eaten strawberries melted on a silver tray. Rose petals scattered across the floor like confetti at a crime scene. Daniel Ruiz lay slumped in the bathroom, his back against the tub, head tilted unnaturally to the side. His dress shirt was soaked in blood, opened at the chest to reveal multiple stab wounds. His eyes were open. His wedding ring was still on his finger. For Charleston PD Detective Jamie Rourke, the scene was jarring. You walk in and expect to find a celebration. But this wasn't love. This was rage. Rebecca was already in custody, detained in the hotel bar in a daze, barefoot, makeup smeared, blood on her gown. She had scratches on her arms but no major injuries. He attacked me, she kept repeating. He got violent. I didn't mean to hurt him. I loved him. But what police found in that room didn't look like self-defense. Forensic technician Lisa Monroe was among the first to process the room. What immediately stood out to her wasn't just the blood, it was how much there was. The blood patterns told a story, she later testified. And it wasn't consistent with someone defending themselves. It was an overkill scene. The blood spatter across the bathroom sink, mirror, and walls indicated Daniel had been seated or leaning against the counter when the first wound was inflicted. Experts identified 8 stab wounds in total. 2 in the neck, 3 in the upper chest, 1 deep cut across the abdomen, and 2 defensive wounds on his forearms and hands. He fought back, said Monroe. He tried to block her. No injuries were found on Rebecca consistent with strangulation or blunt force trauma. There were no signs Daniel had initiated a physical assault. No broken fingernails. No marks on her throat or face. What officers did find was a bloodied steak knife, not from the hotel room's standard cutlery, but from the wedding cake serving set they'd brought from the reception. It wasn't a crime of opportunity, said Detective Rourke. It felt personal, emotional. She didn't grab a knife out of fear. She chose one meant to celebrate their marriage. Near the base of the bed, a crumpled piece of paper caught Monroe's attention. It was Daniel's handwritten wedding vows. Parts of it were still legible under the blood stains. Rebecca, I promise to be your calm in the storm, to love you when you're at your worst. You're not perfect, but you're perfect for me. The last line, smeared almost entirely in red, read, I believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself. For the prosecution, that paper would become a tragic symbol of trust betrayed. His last vow, destroyed by the very person it was meant for. Rebecca was brought to the Charleston County Sheriff's Office for questioning around 5 a.m. Her wedding dress was taken into evidence. Her hands were swabbed. Photos were taken of her minor scratches, most of which appeared superficial. She sat across from Detectives Rourke and Simmons in a sterile gray room, sipping from a styrofoam cup of water. Rebecca, he was mad. I could see it in his eyes. He said I embarrassed him. Then he shoved me. I fell. I was scared. I grabbed the knife. I didn't mean to hurt him. But when shown photos of the body and the wounds, her story faltered. Rourke, you said he shoved you. Where are your bruises? Rebecca, I bruise easy. Maybe they're not visible yet. Simmons, you said he tried to choke you. But there's no marks on your neck. No pressure signs. Rebecca, tears, are you saying I made it up? Rourke, we're saying it doesn't match what we found. When asked why she didn't call 911 after the stabbing, Rebecca fell silent. Then said, I just wanted to get away from him. But the hallway security footage showed her walking calmly to the elevator. No panic. No fear. Just a woman in a bloodied gown, clutching a champagne glass. It was surreal, Rourke said. She looked like she'd just left a party, not a murder scene. Rebecca's iPhone was unlocked after a warrant was issued. Investigators found photos from the reception, including selfies in the hotel room just 30 minutes before Daniel's estimated time of death. In one photo, Rebecca posed in the bathroom mirror holding the knife in question, captioned but unsent. Mr. and Mrs. Ruiz, till death baby. The image's metadata showed it was taken at 2:27 a.m. Daniel's time of death was estimated between 2:35 and 2:45 a.m. Rebecca's browser history from earlier that evening included searches like, how many drinks is too many to black out? What happens if you kill someone in self-defense? Can you stab someone and not go to jail? A psychological evaluation was ordered during her arraignment hearing. Rebecca's defense attorney, Susan Halpern, pushed for a mental health-based defense, arguing that Rebecca was not of sound mind and suffered a dissociative episode triggered by emotional trauma. But prosecutors disagreed. She wasn't hallucinating, said ADA Thomas Griggs. She posed for selfies. She walked to the elevator. She told staff she was fine when asked. This wasn't psychosis. This was a pattern of control that finally ended in lethal violence. The full autopsy confirmed the earlier findings. No drugs in Daniel's system. No alcohol. No evidence he had struck or harmed Rebecca. The knife wounds were deep, deliberate, and in some cases, inflicted while he was already incapacitated. His final moments were spent trying to defend himself against someone he loved. By the time the sun rose over Charleston on June 4th, Daniel Ruiz was in the county morgue. Rebecca Langley was in a holding cell wearing a paper jumpsuit. And two families were forever shattered. Daniel's parents were notified just before 8 a.m. His mother collapsed to the floor. His father reportedly stood in stunned silence, repeating, she was supposed to love him. Was Rebecca Langley a woman pushed past her breaking point, or had she always been broken? As her story unfolded, it blurred the lines between victim and villain. But inside her diary, hidden in plain sight, was a confession of obsession, rage, and a love she swore would never leave her alive. Born in Columbia, South Carolina, Rebecca Ann Langley was the youngest of 4 daughters. Her father, a stern Baptist preacher, was known for his fire and brimstone sermons and strict discipline at home. Her mother, submissive and distant, rarely intervened. By age 10, Rebecca had already learned 2 things: how to act happy in public, and how to hide her real emotions. She could turn on a smile like flipping a switch, said a childhood neighbor. She always looked perfect, but behind the scenes there was a lot of yelling in that house. Her high school counselor, now retired, remembered her as intelligent and manipulative. She could charm you into believing she was a victim, even when she wasn't. Rebecca's psychological file, later unsealed during trial, revealed early diagnoses of oppositional defiant disorder, later shifting into borderline personality disorder, BPD, by age 24. Multiple therapists flagged concerns over impulsivity, paranoia, emotional dysregulation, and most importantly, a fear of abandonment so deep it bordered on delusion. Court records and therapist notes revealed a string of failed relationships before Daniel, each ending in chaos. In 2017, Rebecca dated a corporate attorney named Matthew Delaney. After he tried to break up with her, she allegedly sent him 137 text messages in one night. Showed up at his office screaming about saving their future. Reportedly slashed his tires, though no charges were filed due to lack of evidence. Another ex, in 2019, filed a temporary restraining order after Rebecca showed up at his apartment at 3 a.m. claiming she was pregnant. It turned out to be a lie. He dropped the case after she promised to start therapy. Every time someone left, she unraveled, said her former therapist, Dr. Linda Mercado. She had this deeply rooted belief that people would always abandon her, and she'd do anything to stop that from happening. Even violence. When police executed a secondary search warrant on Rebecca's personal belongings, they discovered something chilling: a black leather journal buried at the bottom of her bridal luggage. Inside were handwritten entries, some dating back to 2021, when she first met Daniel. The words were passionate, obsessive, and slowly deteriorated into something darker. Selected excerpts read, "I finally found someone who stays. He doesn't question me. He adores me. I'll never let him go. Sometimes I see the way he looks at other girls. I could kill him if he ever cheats. If he leaves me after all this, I'll make sure he never leaves again." The final entry, dated just 2 days before the wedding, read, "I feel like he's pulling away, but I've put too much into this. If he ruins this wedding, I swear to God I'll make him pay." The prosecution later referred to it as a blueprint for murder disguised as love. During initial hearings, Rebecca's defense attorney argued that her mental illness and trauma history should be factored into any interpretation of the events. Attorney Susan Halpern emphasized, Rebecca Langley was not a cold-blooded killer. She was a mentally unstable woman cornered in a relationship that made her feel powerless. On the night in question, Daniel allegedly became enraged and she feared for her life. Her actions were reactive, not premeditated. But ADA Thomas Griggs dismantled the narrative piece by piece. No bruises, scratches, or defensive injuries on Rebecca. Blood spatter analysis suggesting Daniel was sitting or stationary when stabbed. Security footage showing no panic, no call for help, only a woman calmly walking to the hotel bar. And, perhaps most damning, the photo she took holding the knife moments before the attack. "This wasn't a mental break," Griggs said. "This was a choice. A fatal one." Court-appointed forensic psychologist Dr. Alan Merriweather conducted a 3-hour evaluation of Rebecca. His report offered a nuanced view. Rebecca exhibits hallmark symptoms of untreated borderline personality disorder, especially abandonment fears, black and white thinking, and emotional instability. However, at the time of the crime, she was oriented, aware, and capable of distinguishing right from wrong. He concluded that while mental illness may have influenced her emotional state, it did not absolve her of legal responsibility. The defense brought forward their own psychologist, who argued that Rebecca suffered from dissociative amnesia and likely had a trauma blackout during the murder. But under cross-examination, even that witness admitted, she remembered enough to walk to the bar. She remembered enough to tell staff he pushed her. That's not amnesia. That's narrative control. Initially, many sympathized with Rebecca. Media outlets showed her sobbing in court, clutching tissues with trembling hands. Her social media was filled with old posts about love, therapy, healing. For a moment, she looked like a woman destroyed by her own trauma. But once the diary entries were released, and the interrogation footage aired, public support collapsed. "She didn't snap," one true crime podcast host declared. "She planned. She posed for photos. She played the victim." Daniel's family also took to the media, pleading for people not to romanticize the story. "My brother was a kind, patient man," said Elena Ruiz, his sister. "He thought he could love her through the madness. But love doesn't fix violence. He gets consumed by it." Experts believe Daniel may have been experiencing a lesser-known form of abuse, coercive control. It doesn't always leave bruises, but it breaks a person slowly through manipulation, isolation, emotional threats, and constant instability. "It's like walking through a minefield in your own home," said domestic abuse counselor Jason Reeds. "You never know when something will set them off. And when they explode, it's always your fault." Daniel, like many male victims, never reported it. He tried to protect Rebecca, even from herself. "He told me once he didn't want to ruin her future by telling anyone what she was really like," said his best friend Joel. Turns out, she ruined his instead. By the time the case reached its final phase, both sides had painted vivid pictures. One of a broken woman fighting back, and the other of a calculating killer hiding behind trauma. But the truth, as always, was found in blood, silence, and the words she never meant to be read. 12 strangers, one verdict, and a courtroom that could barely hold the tension. The trial of Rebecca Langley wasn't just about one murder. It became a referendum on love, mental illness, obsession, and the fatal price of ignoring the signs. But as testimony unfolded, so did secrets neither family expected to hear. The courtroom was packed on the first day of trial. Media vans clogged the narrow street outside Richland County Courthouse. Protesters, curious locals, and grieving family members filled the halls. It had become more than a murder case. It was now a national fixation, a tragedy wrapped in a veil, unfolding like a psychological thriller. Inside, the prosecution and defense began with radically different portraits. The prosecution called her calculating, manipulative, and emotionally dangerous. The defense painted her as deeply traumatized, mentally ill, and cornered in a moment of fear. But one thing was undeniable: Daniel Ruiz was dead and Rebecca Langley held the knife. Assistant District Attorney Thomas Griggs didn't mince words. He stood before the jury and displayed the infamous wedding night photo. Rebecca, holding the knife, red on her dress, expression blank. This is not the face of self-defense. This is not panic. This is pride. That photo was taken after the murder. She posed, she smiled, and she walked to the bar like it was any other night. He described Rebecca's journal as a manifesto, and her obsessive behavior as a ticking time bomb that Daniel never saw coming. Defense attorney Susan Halpern countered with empathy. Yes, Rebecca Langley has mental illness. Yes, she was troubled. But that doesn't make her a killer. What happened that night was the culmination of years of trauma, untreated pain, and a relationship dynamic that made her feel powerless. This was not murder, it was a tragic snap in a damaged mind. She asked the jury to consider context, not just consequence. Daniel's sister, Elena Ruiz, was the first witness. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with quiet rage. He loved her. He protected her. He made excuses for her every time she hurt him emotionally, told us not to worry. But I knew something wasn't right. She recalled a phone call from Daniel 2 weeks before the wedding. He said, "If I don't go through with this, I think she'll hurt herself or me." That statement landed hard. Jurors scribbled. The courtroom went still. Then came Joel Mercer, Daniel's best friend. He recounted multiple incidents. Rebecca smashing Daniel's phone during an argument, threatening to overdose if he left, showing up at Joel's place at midnight demanding to know where Daniel was. He tried to leave twice, Joel testified. She threatened suicide both times. He stayed. Now he's dead. The state called Dr. Alan Merriweather, the court-appointed psychologist who had previously evaluated Rebecca. His diagnosis remained consistent: borderline personality disorder, severe, untreated, but not an excuse for murder. She feared abandonment, yes, but she also knew how to manipulate that fear to control others. That's not delusion. That's intention. The defense brought in Dr. Maya Velasquez, a trauma specialist with a softer lens. She argued that Rebecca likely experienced a dissociative episode during the killing. To her, in that moment, Daniel wasn't just her fiancé. He was every man who ever left her, every trauma, every fear coming to life. She didn't see reality clearly. She saw danger. That's what happens in trauma brains. Under cross-examination, however, Dr. Velasquez admitted Rebecca never reported Daniel being violent or abusive. But emotional triggers don't require real danger, she defended. They only require perceived danger. The prosecution introduced damning physical evidence. Blood spatter patterns indicating Daniel was sitting, possibly undressed, when stabbed. Rebecca's internet search history, which included phrases like, "Can you get charged for stabbing your husband on your wedding night?" just 3 days before the incident. A shredded prenup agreement, which Daniel had allegedly drafted but never asked her to sign. She knew this wedding meant financial security, Griggs said, and she knew walking away meant losing that. The defense argued the search history was taken out of context, part of Rebecca's obsession with true crime stories. She was anxious, not malicious, Halpern insisted. She searched morbid things, yes, but she wasn't planning a murder. On the 7th day, Daniel's mother, Teresa Ruiz, took the stand. She spoke softly, hands shaking, eyes wet but dry of tears. She had cried them all long ago. He loved her more than he loved himself. That's what killed him, not the knife. Her love, twisted into something unrecognizable. Rebecca, seated at the defense table, finally broke. As Teresa sobbed, Rebecca wept silently, clutching at tissue, shoulders trembling. But she never looked up. She never looked at Daniel's family. The closing arguments were thunderous. Griggs reminded the jury of every calculated move Rebecca made, from the photo to the diary to the delay in calling 911. She made a decision that night. Not a mistake. A decision. Halpern begged for mercy, not acquittal but understanding. Yes, punish her. But understand her. This isn't just a courtroom. It's a graveyard for two broken lives. The courtroom held its breath as the jury was sent out. The jury deliberated for 10 hours. Inside the chamber, debates raged. Some jurors sympathized with Rebecca's mental health struggles. Others were unmoved. She knew what she was doing, one juror reportedly said. She just didn't think she'd get caught. When they returned, the courtroom stood. Rebecca stood too, head bowed, hands clenched, a trembling shell of the woman who once walked down the aisle hours before the fatal act. The foreperson read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Rebecca and Langley, guilty of second-degree murder. Gasp. Silence. A sob from the Ruiz family. Rebecca's knees buckled slightly, but she didn't collapse. Just closed her eyes, finally maybe seeing herself clearly. The judge sentenced Rebecca to 28 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 19. She showed little reaction. Outside the courthouse, opinions were split. Some called it justice. Others, a tragedy for a mentally ill woman failed by the system. Most agreed on one thing: Daniel didn't have to die. He died because he loved her too much to leave, Joel later said. She couldn't stand being left, so she made sure he never would. In a sterile cell behind steel doors, the bride who took her groom's life faded into obscurity. But even as the years passed, the scars she left behind refused to heal. What happens to a killer when the headlines fade, and the silence sets in? This is the final reckoning of Rebecca Langley. Rebecca Langley was transferred to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison for women in New York. Upon intake, she was placed under suicide watch. Her once golden blonde hair was cropped short, her wedding ring tattoo still faintly visible on her left hand. Officers noted her silence, her compliance, her blank stares. She wasn't violent. She wasn't loud. She was just quiet. Rebecca is like a ghost that doesn't know it's dead, one correctional officer would later tell a true crime podcast. She haunts her own body. Inside prison, Rebecca began writing. Not journal entries. Not confessions. Letters. Each one addressed to Daniel. Some were rambling, emotionally erratic. Others read like love notes from someone in denial. But one letter, found by a prison counselor after a cell inspection, stood out. I never thought I could do it. I just wanted to stop the pain, stop the voice in my head that said you were going to leave me like everyone else did. But when I did it and you looked at me, I knew you still loved me. Even then. I hope they let me forget one day, but if they don't, maybe I deserve that. The letters were never sent. But after her third year behind bars, her attorney requested they be included as mitigating factors in a parole review. The Ruiz family blocked it. For Daniel's mother, Teresa Ruiz, the trial was not closure. There were birthdays without him. Empty Christmas chairs. Photos left untouched because updating frames felt like letting go. She did not attend the parole board hearings. But every year on October 9th, the day Daniel proposed, she visited his grave in Elmwood Cemetery and left a single white rose. That was the flower Rebecca had requested in her bouquet. I don't think she planned to kill him at the altar, Teresa told a local reporter years later. But I know she meant to hurt him that night. And she succeeded. We all hurt now. Daniel's sister Elena, on the other hand, channeled her pain into action. She founded a nonprofit called Before It's Too Late, which advocates for early intervention in cases of emotional abuse and mental health crises in romantic relationships. We miss the signs. We excuse them. Then someone ends up dead. My brother didn't have to die, but maybe someone else doesn't have to either. Rebecca was not eligible for parole until her 19th year, but by the 10th she had already become a cautionary tale inside the prison walls. Other inmates referred to her as the widow bride. She declined media requests, never wrote a book, refused a Lifetime network dramatization deal. But what stood out most was her refusal to say Daniel's name out loud. She'll say him, my love, or just go quiet, said a prison therapist. It's as if saying it makes it real. And she doesn't want to live in reality. Still, something changed in her during her 13th year. She began teaching creative writing courses to other inmates. One of her students, serving a life sentence for armed robbery, later revealed. She told me, words are safer than feelings. Feelings kill people. That stuck with me. The case had faded from the national spotlight by the time 15 years passed. YouTube retrospectives, true crime podcasts, and even a Netflix docuseries tried to revive the story, but Teresa Ruiz declined every request. I'm not interested in making her famous. She took enough. Yet one particular documentary, The Veil and the Blade, Featured chilling audio from a recorded prison interview with Rebecca during her 12th year. Interviewer: do you think you deserved him? Rebecca pauses: I think I didn't know how to be loved without hurting. So no, I didn't deserve him. But God, I wanted to. The clip went viral. It reignited debates about women and violence, untreated trauma, and whether love can ever excuse horror. In the story's most unexpected turn, Teresa Ruiz visited Rebecca in prison during the 17th year of her sentence. No cameras. No press. Just two women bonded by the man both had loved. One as a son, the other as a savior turned sin. Guards recalled that the visit lasted only 12 minutes. Neither party spoke about what was said. But as Teresa exited, one guard overheard her whisper, "You didn't just kill him. You killed all of us." Rebecca reportedly did not cry. Daniel's headstone reads, "Loved without condition. Lost without warning. Still loved." His story became a lecture case in university psychology classes. Rebecca's writings, heavily redacted, were later used in a Department of Justice mental health awareness campaign focused on recognizing red flags in codependent and obsessive relationships. Their story became more than tragedy. It became a warning, a reflection, and a mirror. Rebecca Langley may one day walk free, but the prison around her heart began long before the steel doors ever closed. And Daniel Ruiz, who believed love could fix everything, paid with his life. In the end, this wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a story of unchecked pain, untreated wounds, and a love too damaged to survive. And sometimes, the most dangerous place to be is in the arms of someone who swears they can't live without you. What do you think truly happened that night? Was Rebecca Langley a ticking time bomb ignored for too long, or a broken soul who reached her breaking point? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share this video. Because behind every tragic headline is a truth the world almost missed.